Hi, everyone. All right, so we're ready to start. Thank you to everyone who is in attendance today. And I am so excited to have Ashley here with us. My name is Michelle Lisa Polissaint. I'm the Education and Community Engagement Manager at Oolite Arts. And this conversation has kind of been a culmination of a lot of thoughts and feelings about what artists might need and how we could be helpful, and particularly in this period. And with me, I have Ashley Artis, who I'm so excited to be in conversation with today. So Ashley is the Field Engagement Manager at Creative Capital, where she works to broaden the organization's scope of programming to better serve the needs of artists and artist communities across the country. Her responsibilities also include the production of the annual Creative Capital Artist Retreat, a multi-day convening offering awardees and cultural producers the opportunity to connect and collaborate. So this conversation is something that's really meant to be an opportunity for artists to get a better insight on what two people find to be a common issue that artists often have with applications, which is just not really knowing what's the best way to put their best foot forward and to share the information about their project or their practice or whatever it is that they're sharing. So I would love Ashley to join in with me a bit on this. We've been working back and forth on how to do this. So we made it really collaborative between the two of us. And both of us just being like, oh, this thing I noticed a lot and this thing I noticed a lot. So we hope that this is a conversation that really gets you all pumped and motivated to get going. So,
yeah, and I hope it's a conversation that can continue. Thank you so much to you, Michelle, and to the entire team at Oolite for putting on this program and putting this series together. I think that it's so important that we continue to share knowledge, even if we can't be in the same space, to continue to share knowledge and ensure that we know how to help and empower ourselves. So thank you so much for bringing me into this important conversation.
Of course. And I think that you just got we've both had we've worked in different fields, in different parts of this particular field, but we've both had to engage with artist applications, open calls, and things of that sort. So it's really important, I think, for these two particular voices to be in conversation together because we've still had slightly different experiences. And we understand how at the base of this, we understand that applying for things is hard. It can be really hard to get your mind in the right place to start the application, get through the application, and then submit it. Sometimes even clicking submit, you're like.
I mean, it's weird. It's such a weird practice sitting in front of a computer screen and opening up about the basis of your practice. I think we all would prefer to have a conversation, to have a lot more time sitting one-on-one with a person or group of people to talk about our work, what we're trying to convey, who we're trying to convey it to. It's deeply personal. So the absence of that, I think, in the application process is one of the most difficult hurdles to get over. Also, it's applying is taking away from your creative time, taking away from your hours in the studio, taking away from the mental energy that can be channeled into your work. You can look at it that way. It can also be really boring and administrative, getting all the stuff you need to get together and, spending the hours, doing this, but not talking to another person. But it's such a necessary part of being a working, thriving artist.
Yeah.
Grant funding can allow you to create outside of what's commercially viable. That I think is its most valuable asset. And that part's incredibly empowering. Residency can give you access to physical space, to production elements, to time spent with other artists and really valuable dialogue about your work. So for the rest of the time together, I just want to frame it as such. Keep in mind that it's applying is an act of empowering yourself to make the work that you want to make now and in the future.
Exactly. That's such a nice way of saying it.
Okay. Nobody loves that. That's not anybody's favorite aspect of being an artist. You want to be doing what you're doing, but applying can help you really fine tune and hone the language that you use to communicate with other folks about your work. And it's only through going through that struggle that you can come out the other side being able to speak about your work to even the most casual art viewer, folks who maybe aren't so interested in art at all, and be able to get the essence of your practice across.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's get into this? We ready?
Absolutely. The first thing I want to say is that applying doesn't need to start when the application window opens. We tend to do the research, figure out when the application window opens, and okay, great, I'm going to put that on my calendar and begin the process then. It doesn't have to start then. Your mind is always worrying with ideas about the next big project. And so my first piece of advice would just be to start a Google document where you can get these ideas on paper. Sometimes it's the translation of what we see in our minds to the paper that can be a big hurdle. Put it in a Google Doc or whatever platform you're using, as something you can return to and play with the language before you're sitting, before that, really intimidating application screen shouldn't be the first time that you're thinking about it or doing concrete writing about the project. I would also say in that vein that you can constantly be readying yourself for opportunities. So as soon as you hear about something opening, you are ready to go. And that sounds terrible, maybe, but imagine having everything that you need ready as soon as that window opens. Yeah. And you can be ready, you can upload it, send it off, and know that you've got a whole bunch of great application materials that you're sending to the other side. And the putting together of these tools is what I like to refer to, and I think we bonded over as building your toolbox. So your toolbox is a list of essential items that you can always have ready to go. You can constantly be working and reworking until you feel comfortable with it. And again, you're not kind of waiting till the final hour to be thinking about your practice and putting words to your practice on paper. So the first thing is the artist bio. I would recommend keeping this really short and sweet. It can be tempting to tell your life story as an artist here. I've gotten some that were like, in kindergarten, I really liked, no. I don't have time to read this story. Do you know how many applications I have to get through? But here you can just focus on what you do, how you do it, and what got you here. Keep it 500 words or less, short, sweet, cute, something that would be part of, your elevator speech. Something else you can work on is your practice description. This can be longer form. So answering some of the same questions. What do you do? How do you do it? You can get into the nitty-gritty of the materials you like to use, what you're trying to convey to a viewer or simply for yourself through these materials, what inspires you, who has inspired you. Just getting that all down on paper is something you can pull from as you're writing your application. Can be really, really helpful. Your project description, again, once that idea, once that inspiration hits, you can start that Google Doc and be getting your notes together and playing with your language. And this is the place where it doesn't have to be perfect. And you can edit, and play. But that will be really helpful when the time comes. And that's if it's applicable. Your short CV, this should just cover the work that you've done in the past 5 years. It should be, again, that short, sweet, cute, boom, 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 bullet points. And you want to try to keep that to 1 page.
Yeah, and it can be less than 5 years also. Yeah. Like if you're somebody who's like working constantly, you can totally make it shorter than 5 years. Just make sure it's 1 page so that it's like a quick, look over of what you've done. Or it can just be the most relevant stuff in the last 5 years and doesn't have to be everything in the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's perfect. And it's also important to keep a long form CV. So this should be a roundup of absolutely everything, updated as soon as you finish that project, that exhibition, that talk, that publication. And just, I would put a calendar reminder, make it the same day, once a month, where for an hour, you just make sure that that's updated, that the language is clean. An artist's portfolio. This is super, super important because work samples can be a tough one for folks to get ready at the last minute. So keep an updated portfolio of your highlights. Emphasis on the highlights. It's the things you love, things that will move people when they look at them, that are clean and well produced. Again, shouldn't be everything you've done, but should give you like a nice, snack like bites of things you've done over the course of your practice. Go ahead, Michelle, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the benefits that I found with particularly and this is new technology obviously, but Google Drive, Google Dropbox, whichever one you prefer to use, is that all of this stuff can be kept somewhere that even if say your hard drive crashes, you lose your laptop, all types of things can happen, that you can just access them virtually. And you can always re-download them and keep adding to them. It's been really helpful for me, especially as a person who's focused in photography. Their images, if I lose that memory card or that thing or whatever, it's gone forever. But having it all on a backup of some sort has been helpful. Another tool that I found really useful also is with Google Docs, you have voice typing. So if you're not as good at sitting down and writing and it feels like a different thing, sometimes I will turn the voice typing on while me and one of my collaborators are speaking, and we'll just talk. And we'll let whatever words pop up on the screen kind of guide whatever we're working on for that description, because sometimes it's easier to do this whole rambly thing where you're just blah, 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 and you just go on and on. And you have this conversation instead of trying to write it all down. And especially because once we start to write, I think it becomes, for some of us, that includes myself, it can become more of a job or a task rather than something that I'm excited about doing.
Yeah, I also think that another step in this toolbox can be kind of gathering the information from the types of residencies, grants, and other opportunities from the applications of these places, and just make a list of commonly asked questions. Fun fact, we have compiled a couple of these commonly asked questions, and we will definitely send them around to you after the conversation, so you can immediately add something to your toolbox.
Yeah. So let's see, where are we? So, where did I just lost myself? Sorry. Did I lose you, Ashley?
I mean,
oh, okay. Okay, so where were we? We're at, okay, so identifying the kind of, of application that you're applying to is really important. So understanding that if it's project-based, if it's need-based, if it's research-based, understanding that can also be helpful before you even get to this actually writing the application. So do you want to expand a little on that?
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, the first point is do your research. NIFA, Creative Capital, Residency Unlimited, you can subscribe to the mailing list of major grant makers and other funders, all great places to start. That way the information is kind of coming to your inbox, because there are so many opportunities out there, but not every opportunity is for everyone. You really want to read up on the organization, Who are they? What's their mission? What are their grant making principles? Are they hands-on? And you're a hands-off person, then that's not the opportunity for you. And to your point, there are different types of opportunities in the mix. Is it project-based? Is it research-based? Is it merit-based? Do you have to produce a work by the end of the residency? Is that exhibition happening during a time that's really busy for you? The timeline of completion for that open call just too soon for the project that you're trying to make? You want to consider whether the opportunity aligns with your calendar and your practice and the work that you're trying to make. And not all opportunities are for you, but there is something out there for everyone. I would also point out to make sure that you're eligible. Organizations have different stipulations, and if you're applying for opportunities for which you're not eligible, you're kind of clogging up the system for other folks who are, making it harder to get through, for funders to get through the proposals that are really pertinent.
Yeah, I really think that's important too, because I think that, and I'll say with like certain applications I've looked over and read through, we'll find ones that we immediately cross out, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what you don't want to do. So like if you're not eligible, just like step back, let someone else apply, just because it's not, you know. I think one of the major things with any application that we put out into the world as like funders is that we know we're creating these applications based on how we can process them in a more efficient manner and in a more thorough manner at the same time. So it's important for you to, as the applicant, make sure that you're not adding more work into the hands of the person who's reading these applications by either, say, not reading the eligibility requirements or things of that sort. So for sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. And again, there is something for everybody. It's very tempting to, especially a big money opportunity, just, you know, I'm going to shoot my shot. It's really critical. I mean, you're kind of wasting your time and you're wasting the time on the people on the other end if you just don't meet some of the basic requirements. So definitely make sure to pay attention to that too. And once you've made that determination, I would say work backwards from the due date and subtract a week. Mm-hmm. This is really important because life happens, stuff happens, your computer breaks, you know, family issues, kind of crazy stuff that's happening around us right now. And then you can make your timeline. You can think of the application as a project and make your timeline, and this will help you keep track for completing. I have to say, I make timelines for my own personal stuff. I'm a huge fan of timelines, just to keep track of the milestones and finish the application in digestible pieces. That'll help you look at the application again in those small portions versus this big kind of heavy, maybe intimidating thing that you have to complete all at once. And you know, we've all been up till 4 a.m. the night before a busy work day, trying to get it done, or calling the office at 5:59 asking for an extension. We've all been there for sure. Yeah. It happens. But a timeline can definitely help prevent those kind of emergencies. And just jump into that application early. As I said, you don't have to wait for the window to open to start it. At Creative Capital, we have a whole host of resources that you can look at prior to the window opening, including the questions that are going to be on the application, examples of great budgets or great bios. There's so many resources that you can utilize ahead of time, so that again, when that application opens, that window opens, it's cute. You can just, you know, press submit. And to that end, after reading through the application, doing your research, reading through the application, making sure it's for you, copy the questions onto a Google Doc or write them down, however you need to do it, and get writing. Don't type your answers directly into the application. I cannot tell you how many sad face moments I have had when my internet goes out, or you know, have some tech glitch and all of the work that I've been working on is erased. And maybe you can contact somebody to help you get it back, but just to be on the safe side and save yourself a lot of heartache, just put it somewhere where you can be saving it constantly. You know, the cat spills soda on your keyboard and then all of your hard work is erased. As pet owners, we know that, you know, our fur babies are not always respectful of the hard work that we're doing. So.
And the you know, Google Docs, Google Word, all those applications are also helping you with spell check. If you use things like Grammarly, they're available on there. So you want to be able to also like reread that more. Sometimes when you're doing it directly into the application, it's a little hard to see spelling errors and things because it just looks a little different, and it's not actively doing like grammar checks and things like that Google Docs or Microsoft Word would do. Well, I wanted to go back though to the eligibility side of things.
Yeah.
Because on top of like, say like, you know, don't apply for things that are for specifically visual artists if you're a musician, obviously for those eligibility side. But also if you find that you're adjusting your project to somehow fit within an application, you might be hurting yourself. And I think that's something really important for artists to understand, because I know plenty who do it. I've definitely done it myself. And it's something that you feel like you're doing, you know, you're like, I need to get this money, you know, I want this thing, I want to do this project, and you're passionate about your project, but you might be throwing it into an ether that might be pointless for you, because it's really easy to see that it doesn't make sense or fit with the project. Oftentimes when you're someone who, say, like you, who's like read through enough of these applications to know like if this actually would work with this particular grant opportunity. So that is something that I wanted to like touch on before you move on, because I think that that's something that happens so often, and it can also make it hard for you to finish the project if you're trying to force something to fit in, you know, a square peg into a round thing or whatever that term is. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. Don't fit the square peg into the round hole. Again, there are opportunities for whatever you want to do. And it's just, yeah, if your project is truly a theater project and you're trying to fit it into a film mold, you're going to do yourself a disservice, because the people on the other end of that line, even if you were to get the award, the people on the other end of that line are experts in that field, right? You do have some multidisciplinary awards. We just opened our award up to a multidisciplinary award every year, which was really exciting. But when we saw that when we did do discipline specific awards, we had a lot of people who were like really trying to fit their project into a discipline that it just simply wasn't. So yeah, to your point, don't let it be what it's going to be.
Yeah, and it's like, again, with like the people who are reading this, they know what they're doing. They're either artists themselves or were artists at some point. They're experts in this thing. And so you don't want them to sit there and read your application and think this person didn't read any of the questions, clearly wasn't paying attention to what it was. And that's not really a good look for your application just off top, just isn't. So,
and on that note, you might want to get your pencils or record this part of the conversation, because Michelle and I have tag teams and based on our experiences, some great do's and don'ts for applying. So to your point, Michelle, do follow directions. This application is looking for specific information for really specific reasons. There's intentionality behind every single question. And you don't want to give folks an excuse to reject your application for just trying to do it your way and not following directions.
wait, can I insert?
That can be really frustrating. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to remind everyone, we did make like a one-sheeter that we'll be sharing with everyone after this with most of this information. So don't worry if you feel like you're not able to follow at all. So like that is something that's going to come in your email as well. Yeah.
Got you covered with the homework. fun fact, I was a pre-K teacher in
You were?
prior life. So yeah.
I didn't know that. That's so lovely.
We'll talk about that.
No wonder you're so good at like this like caring voice. You've got like the good, oh my gosh, you've got such a school teacher voice.
I'll take it. Can you guys tell Michelle and I go way back? Do get started on this application early. I cannot stress this enough. It's so heartbreaking when folks have a great idea and a really good project and just haven't finished that aspect of the application, but the due date is the due date, because there are so many things that have to happen on the back end afterwards. Starting it early will let you feel comfortable with what you're submitting. There won't be any like panic sweat at like 5:59 when you're hitting the submit button. Gives you time to write, to review, to get feedback, and feel really, really confident. Don't wait until the last day to submit. It goes horribly wrong every single time. It's just not, don't put yourself in that pressureful situation. You might take some more time than you need to get all the materials together, or if you need references for the application, it can put pressure on the folks that you're asking for those letters, which you just never want to put folks who you want to vouch for you in that position. And then the tech issues. Every single time, there are just thousands of people trying to access these sites at the same time in that last 2 hours before the bell rings. And it's heartbreaking because there's some good stuff that gets lost in the sauce of just not being in on time. Do ask questions, and again, ask them early. Folks are really accessible. I know my team, we answer individual questions every day once the awards window open. And at the beginning of the window, we have time to give you a thoughtful response and to get it to you quickly. But towards the end, when you're gearing up for the second cycle and the tech issues are happening, we just might not have the time to get back to you. And we want to make sure that you feel taken care of and you understand what you have to undertake. It's just time and really capacity. You're much more likely to get an answer if you ask early. This is probably my, and we talked about this before, Michelle, biggest don't, aside from don't send it in 2 hours ahead. Don't use flowery language. It can be seen as fluffy, especially these days when all we have are these virtual communications, these emails and these Zooms. You want to make sure that you're communicating clearly and you're getting to the point, and you're not just using jargon for the sake of jargon. You are smart, you are brilliant. There's no need to bury the brilliant work you do in 16 syllable words just for the sake of it. You want to use clear, concise language that conveys the content in a way that a casual art viewer would understand. Readers are also reading a lot of applications, and I want to remember what the work is, not the language that you used to describe it. I want to walk away from reading your application and have it imprinted in my brain.
The imprint is also such a big thing that one of the secrets, which I realized we didn't put in this list, but is also using the title of your project in the description. You don't want to say the project, which people do all the time. You want to say, I'm trying to think, Butter's Day Out. I'm just gonna say that. If the project is called Butter's Day Out, you say Butter's Day Out is about my dog going on a trip down the street. And while Butter is doing that thing and Butter's Day Out, and you want to repeat that, it really sticks in the mind of the person who's reading, especially if they like the project, because they'll be like, oh, Butter's Day Out was such a great application, as opposed to that one project about the dog. You don't want that. You want Butter's Day Out was such a great idea. And so that's something that I think is when we do the flowery language thing, we kind of get lost and bogged down with like the metaphors and these, you know, and I think one of the things a writing teacher once said, could you say this in one sentence? And I think that's what sometimes a flowery language will be 5 sentences that could have been compacted into one sentence that was just a description. And if you're doing that, it's really important to kind of take a step back and restructure. Dennis also always says to like show it to your least artsy friend. So that person, if that person can read it and understands what the project is, you're good. Like you're golden, you're doing a great job, totally makes sense. If they read it and they're like, what? You gotta restart. Because, you know, although it's usually like industry experts, sometimes you throw, you know, like one of my last Wavemaker cycles that I did, we had an arts administrator, 2 artists, and a political organizer. So, you know, that person, although super smart, super intelligent person, he probably wouldn't have understood the very fluffy language that artists can sometimes use. So if he had read an application with a lot of fluff, he wouldn't have been able to connect to it. But he was an important panelist to have on that jury because we did want to see more projects that were responding to social issues. So that was my little insert into that part.
No, that's perfect. If you want somebody to walk away from the table like, we gotta make Butters Day Out. How do we make this happen? You know, because even if, and this is another thing I think is really important to remember, even if you don't end up getting X grant or X residency, this proposal has been before some really incredible industry experts who, you know, the panels are majority rules. So it may not be that like everybody likes it, but if that one person is like, Butters Day Out really stuck with me, I have to contact Michelle after this, that's a way that projects get made as well. So repeating, be incisive, concise, to the point. And to your point, Michelle, I would say have friends read your application. Have at least 3 friends read your application. An artist, an arts administrator, and someone, ideally an artist and arts administrator, and someone who is less familiar with the arts. This will give you such good feedback for communicating about yourself and your work to get all of those different perspectives. And we'll probably cut out the flowery language. One specific don't that I have is don't just send reviewers to Instagram as your sole online reference. This is great as a supplement. If you have a beautiful Instagram, make sure to include that as a supplemental online reference for your application. Do fire up one of those free or low-cost hosting platforms and build yourself a website that you can be proud of, that you really think properly represents you and your work. You want to come across as professional as possible.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And there's really easy ways to do it. Like my friend once, when she was kind of like low on cash, but had a graphic designer friend, she had a friend, she paid for her one-time domain, which was like $15 on GoDaddy. And a graphic designer friend basically built a Tumblr page with like an overlay of her entire website on it. So it's like a one-sheet website. It cost her $20 total, and she used that until she was able to move to like a better platform where she would customize it and do all the work herself. And there's lots of options online for free ways to do that. So really look into that. You're setting yourself up a little bit for like not a great response when you do just send like Instagram or, there's lots of platforms like that, but they're just not as good as a curated website, So, and some more do's and don'ts. A big don't is skipping over questions. And obviously if there's like, sections that are considered required questions, you can't completely skip over them. But if there's a section or a question that's like multi-part, say it's like a 3-part question and you answered 2 parts, you haven't completely answered that question. Make sure you complete all 3 of those questions. I think sometimes we're like, I feel like I answered the question. If you feel like you answered the question, you probably didn't. Make sure you go back and make sure it is answered. Like, it's like, I feel like I got close enough. Close enough isn't really right. And again, like as we've said, these applications are being built by people who know what they're looking for and know what to find and where. Because I think that one thing I do think as an artist, when I was like just an artist and like wasn't really as privy to this information, I always felt like applications were made to like wean people out, and they're not. They're actually made for you to put the best information forward about your project so we know the most about it. So if you're going into it with this thought process of that, and you also skip things, you may be like setting yourself up for failure. And then break it down into parts if that's easier. So like if the question is like, you know, what kind of venue is required for this project? Do you have an idea of where that venue is? Da, 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 da. Split it up into those 3 parts, answer all 3 questions, then combine it into 1 sentence if that's what you want to do, or into a little paragraph. But do give yourself, that's like really, really imperative, is to make sure you're answering the questions as thoroughly as possible. And then be specific with your project description. Were you saying something, Ashley?
Yeah, I was just saying that it's tempting when you've been writing so much and you've been staring at the computer screen for so long to skip those questions that aren't required.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this is about, to your point, Michelle, putting your best foot forward and making, you know, a real impression on the reader. And if you haven't answered that question and somebody else has, like, is that a way that you want to weed yourself out?
Yeah.
No, do it. The questions are intentional. Again, they're coming from people who love artists, love the work, and want artists to succeed. And it can give that little bit of detail that can really set your proposal off. So just as a practice, just answer all of the questions.
Yeah. And like with that, making sure that your project description is like specific, is as specific as possible. And one of the things I do, particularly with like exhibition proposals, when I would have artists reach out about those things, I would tell them, imagine like someone's walking through the space. Describe what walking through that space would look like. Describe what interacting with that project will look like. That sometimes can help you get a little bit more in layman's terms if you're not able to do it without like the flowery language side. Is sometimes you're like, okay, so if you open the door to my house, it looks like this, you know? So describing your projects and your exhibitions in the same way can really be helpful in giving the viewer of your application a little bit more insight about that. So the next one, so this is more like housekeeping side of things, but don't submit really big files. And like, as much as like it may seem like whatever, like not a big deal, don't do it to yourself. I have had a lot of instances where, you know, using something like Submittable, there's all these different ways to submit applications these days. Some organizations have their own website for it too. And usually they'll create some kind of restriction, but sometimes if they're, say, like willing to accept video, they won't put a restriction on it. But what you don't want to do is submit like a gigantic PDF or a gigantic video that's like, you know, a couple hours long that takes, you know, might take an hour to download on someone's Wi-Fi network, because oftentimes jurors are being shared this information beforehand and then they convene together, or some kind of variation of that where the jurors are doing it themselves. So you can't guarantee that every juror will be able to download your 3 gigabyte file. So reduce them as much as you can. If you, with images, for example, keep them under a megabyte. Most computers are not going to be, you know, like blowing them up that big anyway. And if the organization needs, like, say, a larger image for you for like the second round or for like meeting in person, they will clarify that and they will specify that. But please avoid submitting gigantic files that will make it harder to read. Sometimes even Submittable has a hard time even opening large files like that. It happens all the time. As much as like we wish these things were super streamlined and like impossible to get wrong, it's technology. We have no control.
Submit the best piece, the best portion of the work. Like for literature, submit your best 20 pages. No one's reading your whole book because they have 90 to 100 other applications to read. So try to keep it to delicious bite size.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into this next one, which is do remember that the people reviewing the applications are human, so be nice and be patient. I mean, in the sense of like, obviously like reaching out as if like they're not like reading your application quickly, things like that, but also just like with your descriptions, that's part of it. Like with whatever you're submitting, thinking about the fact that a human being is reading this. And that's also a part of like coming up with these short versions of that descriptions of your projects. Because if someone say, you know, with Creative Capital, how many applications did you get last year in this last round? You know, for places that are getting thousands of applications, the last thing you want to do is have them like, have a juror be like, I can't read this 10-page application, you know? And that can happen, you know, if after you've read a certain number, it's like, come on, I can't keep doing this, you know? And especially if like the first, say, 2 paragraphs haven't given them the answers to the question, which is what is the project, essentially. So really, really keeping that in mind. And then like budgets. So major don't. Do not inflate your budget. The people reading your application know the cost of production, materials, usually, especially like I know for a fact that Creative Capital tries to make sure that there are people who are experts in that field. And so they can see when like your mural project and the cost of your mural project has been inflated. You know, we know how much paint costs. Most of us know how much paint costs. So if you say that like a 5 by 5 foot mural will cost you $10,000, you're probably lying. You know, and it's really, and that's also for you. It's not just for the person reading. What you don't want to do is inflate your budget because you want more money. And then when you submit your, you know, your actual paperwork for payment or for like your final reports for say like grants, and you've only spent $1,000, a lot of grants will expect you to return what you didn't pay. So you also don't want to do that to yourself. It's not a good look for an artist to say, ask for a bunch of money and then have to have that money returned back to the organization. Because what they could have done is say giving you $2,000 and giving another artist $8,000. And that happens as, I mean, and I know it's hard, especially in the midst of this particular time. And just as an artist, sometimes the opportunities are few and far between in the course of the year. But it's better to not have extra money in your pocket that technically doesn't belong to you than to say maybe apply for more stuff. So that's really important as well. So another don't is don't rely on your name what's the word? To do all the work for you, right? So like take your time, do the work, and give yourself the best shot. So you have to make a good first impression. Oftentimes, like if you're an artist who's like say known in your particular community, you can't assume that someone reading your application in Wisconsin will feel the same way or know who you are. So you have to, every time you're going forward in front of these groups and these juries, act like they don't know you. And give them a description of yourself and your work that doesn't assume anything about what they know about you as an applicant. And it is your first impression. It's your only opportunity to like give a first impression. So give it your best shot. Take your time and really get as much out of the application experience as you can. And that's doing all of the do's and don'ts that we said through this thing, is like really, really thinking about who you are as an artist, what your project is, and making sure that you have put your best foot forward, right? So, okay, I feel like, should we go into the Q&A side now?
I'm ready.
You ready? Okay, so it looks like we have 18 questions. You want to go back and forth?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll start with Jen. So Jen Clay asks, when applying for a project that includes techniques or technologies that the jurors may not know, what do you recommend to go into explaining it?
That's an interesting question. I think that 9 times out of 10, you can be sure that the jurors, that what the organization has done has put together a slate of reviewers or jurors, panelists, however you want to call them, who are very familiar with the fields that they're reading for. But that 1 time out of 10, if you're working with some new material in space, for example, that maybe no one on that jury has heard, just say it plain. Again, you don't want to use flowery language. You can use links to websites if there are references that will help explain things. But just use the clearest language you can. And honestly, that's cool. I want to know what, material or technique you're working with
Yeah.
that I've never heard of. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think also if you can explain what that thing is in a sentence without completely deterring from your application, try to do that as best as you can. But definitely make use of the opportunities for supplemental materials. A lot of applications will give you that opportunity to do that and use it as much as you can to give more clarity on what that technology is. And yeah, I do feel like oftentimes there is somebody in the room who knows what that thing is, or if they don't, they will do the research to do so to check in, but try to give that forward first so that they don't have to do it themselves. All right.
Okay, can I read this one to you?
Yeah.
Anonymous attendee writes, what if you are an artist who is just starting and don't have any places you've shown your work at?
Okay, that's important. That's a really good question. So what you can include with those types of applications is, so say, if, I'm assuming you're talking about like your CV and your portfolio specifically. I don't think it's always as dependent on having shown your work. I think that that's a concern for a lot of people. If you're, say, an artist who has only shown at a couple of galleries or a couple of spaces and you want to like beef up your CV, things you can include is like different like workshops and things that you've either like hosted or attended that have built up your work. You can include where you went to school, where you studied. You can include also like, if you want to like make it feel a little bit more beefy, a little statement about your work in the CV as well. I think that it sometimes feels like a CV is like a barrier of entry because it's asking you for like what you've done. But sometimes it's really just to get a better idea. Like it's really, for most of the applications that I've read, just like a one-sheeter to be like, okay, cool, this is stuff you do. And not so much of like a short CV, out of here. Yeah. The more important thing is the project description. I don't stress about the CV. And then with your portfolio, really you can share as much of your work as you'd like to, essentially. Keep it concise, obviously, but you can share the work that you feel the most strongly about when it comes to your portfolio. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so, the next one. Dana Della Camera, I read that weird. Will you be sending out, I see that this is being recorded. Will you be sending this out to those who are attended? I would love to catch. Yes, we will be recording this as you, I feel like you can see maybe somewhere on here that it's recording. I'm pointing, but I don't know where that is. But we are recording this, and we will be sharing both the video and also the one-sheeter that we made as a supplement to this. So don't feel like you have to be like crazy. Also, if you are wanting to ask a question, please include it in the chat. We won't be doing like the sound feature just because it can be really hard. Okay, so I'm going to do that, done. Okay, so next question.
Okay, is it better to have Nancy Billings, right? Is it better to have a wide body of similar pieces or a variety of work? I think that I'm going to answer, and then I definitely want you to answer this one, to jump in here too, Michelle. I think it depends on the type of artist you are. If you have been working really hard to perfect one thing over 20 years or so, that can be just as interesting as somebody who's done, a film and some conceptual work and some photography. I think you need to do what feels closest to your personal practice. I don't ever think administrators should tell you that you have to flex. Your practice is your practice.
I think also, in addition to that, I think maybe also thinking about the application itself. So if you're applying for, say, a ceramics residency and you've done painting and stuff, you can include a couple of paintings, but do focus more on the stuff that would get them excited about your practice. And it's not about better or worse, it's more so about what is the best foot forward that you can put up for yourself. So saying that, like, if your paintings are better than like your ceramics, or your community engaged work is better than your ceramics or whatever, focus on the thing that you feel is strong, but also think about what you're applying to in that as well. But there's really no direct answer for that. It's really up to you to decide what makes the most sense for each application that you're applying for. Okey-dokey. So Monica Lopez de Victoria, hey girl. So what if you have a career that is over 20 years? Just putting the last 5 years just cuts off so many exhibitions that were significant. Currently, I have just the highlight of exhibitions in one page. You're totally right. I definitely think that's something that we can think about as well. And I think the last 5 years is more so that try to focus on the more relevant stuff, the things that'll be easier to find and to be able to share and show images of. Sometimes if it's like been a certain amount of time, you won't have access to those images anymore. And so maybe just thinking about it in that way, it's not as like stringent as only last 5 years, but try to make a one-sheeter that makes sense. And also one of the things you can do is also change your CV based on the different applications you're doing. So if you want to focus on just the things that you've done that are related to like this kind of project or a different kind of project, that might also help with making your CV a little bit more, a little bit tighter for those one-pagers. But some places also don't mind you sending the full CV, but just as like a standard, avoid sending like a crazy CV that's like so big that it's hard to like, download, read, and flip through. So, do you have any addition to that, Ashley?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, to have a 20-year career is amazing. And we do accept long form CVs. And that's particularly because we are looking for evolution and for how this next project is kind of a catalytic event in your practice. So seeing that kind of long-term growth with the pivots or the kind of straight arrow approach can really help us get a sense for who you are. I think the 5-year thing, really the short form and 5-year CV really helps us for people to see like, what have you been doing recently? Like, can't wait to see. But I think to your point, you can have a highlight reel CV as well that really pulls in your favorite projects from the past, or your favorite projects and experiences from the past over the course of your career.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to get to the next question?
Sure. Hi, Leslie. Fraser writes, can you share the grant opportunity sources and links? Yes, we'll be sharing that as part of your kind of like take-home packet. So that'll have some resource links, some of those frequently asked questions that we referred to earlier, and also all of the do's and don'ts.
Okay, so Jennifer Jones O'Neill asked a very good question. Since joining the corporate world in 2013, how do I explain the long break in my CV?
I think that's where the rest of the application comes in. You submit your CV that shows the work that you had been doing and the work that you've been doing since that break. And in your artist bio, you mention, I went here and I pivoted back. And this is what brought me back. So the rest of the application will work for you. The descriptions in the application will work for you in that thing. And to Michelle's point, some people do put their artist bio on top of the CV. So that's an additional place where you can kind of, let people know, hey, I made a pivot and I'm back.
Yeah, and again, the CV isn't actually everything, I think that a lot of times people, and I don't know, I wonder, I wish I could, I guess, how could I articulate this? I think it's partially because of the way the corporate and more work world works. It's like the CV is everything. But thankfully in this instance, you actually have, because I know that with like a job or whatever, when you submit a CV in your resume or whatever, it's like, that's it. You're just a name at the top with a list of your worth is just this list, Whereas as an artist, you're actually quite lucky because you have both that list, and then you have a description, you have a bio, you have a portfolio, you have like these 6 other things. And I find that a lot of artists get focused on the CV and they're like, CV, 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 what if my CV is bad? But then it's like, the work is great, you know, and the description is great, this other stuff is great. We looked at the CV for 2 seconds, and comparison to everything else, we focused on that. Genuinely, the CV is
It's
like,
true.
it's rarely, the CV rarely makes or breaks your application. It rarely makes or breaks your application. What makes or breaks your application is the descriptions, the supplemental materials, the like
work samples and the budget.
Yeah. So the CV actually don't, I mean, make a good one, but don't stress so much about that, for sure.
And to your point, Michelle, what you get to do, what folks entering the corporate world or other kind of fields have to do in a 1-page cover page, you get to do in this application, because we're trying to get a holistic view of who you are. I wish some job applications worked like proposals, grant proposals, but alas.
Just checking in because one of our coworkers are checking in on the chat to make sure there's any questions we haven't missed. I just checked in with her about that. Oh, so that one didn't go away. But who's next? I can't remember who my next to read. It's fine, I'll just read. So Alexander Zestera asks, hi. Artists have always been on the forefront of societal change. What would you recommend for artists whose work might push against the funding or institutional practices? Ooh. A little juicy.
I mean, philanthropy is a beast, and we all know that. It comes with a lot of icky stuff, from the sources of money to the way that applications cannot make accommodations for folks who need them. You name it, there's some problematic elements of this work. But I would say, in an ironic twist, use the beast to do the work that you want to put out there in the world. Use the beast to, make sure that your work gets seen and pushes the buttons and asks the questions. And, maybe it's the project that, gets the philanthropic world to overhaul its practices. It's important I don't want your anti-establishment work to prevent you from getting the message out there. So sometimes you gotta kind of use the thing that you're railing against to ensure that change can happen, if that makes sense.
So I'm realizing that we have like 24 questions and we're already at like 7 o'clock. So,
oh no, there's such good questions too.
I mean, are you okay with going over time? Like, are you in a rush? Okay, so we will try to get through as many of these.
Not going anywhere. This next one I think we touched on though. So CV is not necessarily being the most important part of your application. It's about the work and how you speak about the work. Because we all know that the problematic nature of arts funding, there's also a problematic nature in which people can access exhibitions and all sorts of opportunities. So just because you haven't been shown doesn't mean the work's not good.
Yeah, for sure. So this question is definitely for me. Are short films a good fit for the Oolite grant? I'm going to assume you're talking about the Ellie's. And I'll take this time to also say the Ellie's application is due August 3rd. So please submit those. And yeah, short films are actually great for the Ellie's. We do already have our, cinematic arts, which is like for feature length films. And then we have the block, which is specific films focus on Miami neighborhoods. So yeah, totally great to submit for the Ellie's. So, okay, this was the same question. Okay. Okay, So also, I will
How
say,
about,
unfortunately, no more questions in the chat because we do have to wrap up pretty soon. And I feel like we'll probably go like even further down if we keep going. So do you want to go with the next one, or I can do it?
sure. I'm just looking for a question that is completely brand new. So no offense if I skip over your question. There are a lot of big questions in here.
Is it a bad look when a question?
Is it? Oh, I was just about to.
Yeah, that one.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm a proponent of being as concise. Is it a bad look when a question asks you to keep the answer under 250 words, but you can say it in under 100? Or rather, can an answer be too short? An answer can be too short if you don't answer the question thoroughly. But if you can say what you need to say in 100 words, then that's fine. Actually a great practice to try to get your descriptions as short as possible. Then you know you're being concise. You're not using, unless it's 100 words of flowery language. I will take that back. Don't do 100 words of flowery language. But if you really truly think that you're getting the point of the work across in that many words, then have at it. How about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And then we have another question here that's like, should I try to get close to the max word count? This isn't like a high school essay that's like, 1,000-word essay has to be at least 1,000 words. It's not a situation like that. What's better for you to do?
Going to the thesaurus.
Exactly. Like try to get everything to something that's like a little bit more concise. Get it concise and make sure it says what it's supposed to say. That's what's more important. And if you can get that into less than 100 words, great. But if you do it in 100 words and it's like missing something, add that. You have 250. You have a total of 250. So definitely don't try to add more words just to get more words. It's not actually. It doesn't benefit you. That's where you end up adding fluff without realizing it.
Absolutely. As a new MFA student, should I wait till I finish my education before I apply to artist grants? I would say yes. So many grants are targeting folks who don't have access to the type of resources that an MFA gives you in terms of, studio and, a community to be in dialogue with, and the community of folks who are coming to do your crits. All of that is such a, congratulations to you. That's amazing. But most of the grants out there are for folks who have graduated school or folks who are 25 or older, for a host of reasons.
Yeah, I would say additionally to that is that part of the reason that a lot of applications will ask you to, like, for people to be not students or already completed with their coursework is because of time. A lot of times artists who are in the middle of an MFA don't actually have the time to do the project. And it's a trial and error process that a lot of organizations have gone through where they're like, well, let MFA people in. And they're like, sometimes those MFA people, it's the same reason an MFA doesn't recommend that you work or have a job. So I definitely think it's best to maybe wait and wait until you have the time and also aren't kind of pulling from resources from folks who don't have them. Okay.
But definitely utilize the resources at your fingertips in terms of finding those future opportunities. That is something that most administrations do have a lot of access to. And you can start your research early and, know the type of thing that you want to go for, or have some idea of the type of thing that you want to go for afterwards.
Yeah. So let me look at, I'm trying to make sure. So there's a question here for I'm gonna just make it a little more brief. If you're a waitlisted artist and you end up not making it through, the next time you reapply, should you submit the exact same application or should you change that application that you submitted in some way?
That's a really good question. I think it depends.
It depends.
Well, first, can you reapply? Because some folks
Yeah.
don't let you reapply. Then some folks don't let you reapply with the same project. So I would suggest, although we've had some come through that are the same project, it just depends on, you know, who's reading them sometimes. I would suggest making sure to get any feedback, because typically when you get that far along in the process, the organization will provide you with feedback. I mean, we take copious notes in our panel discussions, and we do offer that to folks who are shortlisted, like you got really far along in the process. I would sit with it. Take the feedback, sit with it, think about the now, because a lot can happen in a year. It's typically a year between application cycles. I would update something so it doesn't look like you're just like, here, I'm gonna try it again. But take the feedback. If you're really, really passionate about the idea, tweak it a little bit. Definitely add some new work if you are making things in between that time. Just give it some gloss.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, as much as I don't like to have to do this, I think we should answer maybe one more question and have to wrap up from there. Unfortunately, as much, you know, we're able to answer a lot, but we didn't get through as many as we could. I'll put my email in the chat, and you can reach out to me directly. Sorry, right here. And you can reach out to me directly. And so do you want to find one more question and then we'll answer that?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I feel so safe to all these questions.
There's so many good questions. I'm just going to go with this top one. Lourdes Fuller asks, what if you're not sure of budget or cost? You have to be sure of budget and cost. That is, you have to be very sure of budget and cost. But to your point, like, things can run the gamut. There can be a range of costs for different types of things, but budget is not necessarily about you landing at that specific number once the project is done. It's to show that you've done the due diligence and that you know what you're talking about. So it's super important to do that due diligence, get researching, ask friends, look at projects that may be similar to what you're thinking. But there's so many resources out there to help. Creative Capital, I know, has a really great page of resources for how to put a good budget together and where to start from. But that part is really, really critical.
Yeah, definitely important to always know what your budget is. You can't, that would make or break your application, less than your CV would. Not having a budget or skipping over that altogether will definitely make or break it. And I think that's our last question for the night. I can't believe we actually went over time. I mean, I can't actually, but I really hope this was like helpful for everyone. I know that these applications can be really hard and you can feel very bogged down by them, but just take it from two people who are part of this process. We want to be helpful. We don't want this to be hard for you. And I think we're pretty friendly and like carrying it open. And so I do hope that you are willing, I feel a little bit more comfortable reaching out and asking questions from here forward. Again, I want to thank Ashley for being here with me. This has been so nice. So sad that we couldn't actually fly you out to Miami to do this. But one day we'll be able to meet together in groups again. And before I finish, I want to thank my coworkers at Oolite for the support through the program, and also the Maurer Family Foundation for all the funding that helps us to continue to put together these types of programs. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye.